Hello and welcome back to the Deborah Peters Show. My name is Deborah Peters and I am so grateful that you've jumped on here with me today. Hopefully this 12 noon slot Pacific time is carved into your calendar for the rest of next year. And we may have an additional show coming up for you, so I'm going to keep you posted on that sometime around the end of February, early March. This show is all about consciousness. It's about who you are being. And consciousness is a self-awareness. I look at consciousness as being God. It's our connection to our God force. And so I've split that into 5 main categories because this is what I see most people have a hard go with. And that's health, wealth, business, relationships, and self-expression. I really believe after all the personal growth work I've done since I was in my 20s and the work I've done with clients in 19 countries over the last 25 years in a wide variety of industries, that if you can take your life and you can break it into those 5 categories and really start raising the bar for yourself on your self-awareness, what makes you tick, how do you feel, what are your feelings telling you, what's your body saying to you, what are your relationships mirroring back to you, what direction is your business saying it wants to grow in that you're not paying attention to. Learn to start to dial those things in. And what'll end up happening is you'll feel like you're more at cause over your policy of existence, which brings me to something that I've been wanting to read on this show for a very long time. I don't know what happens. I go into this zone when the episode comes up and I'm thinking about my guest and we're talking before we go live about what it is that we want to say and the points we want to get across, and then I forget to read it. So during the pandemic, which was years ago now, I looked up a word that really touched my heart. I had found this meditation online and I looked up a word that touched my heart, and I decided to just write down the dictionary meaning of the word, and the word is sovereign. So when I looked up the word sovereign online, this is what I got from the word sovereign. This is the meaning of being sovereign. Sovereign. I am in the full right and power of governing myself, my life, and a whole without any interference from outside sources or bodies. So as a whole, I am in full right and power of governing myself, my life as a whole, without any interference from outside sources or bodies. The next definition is, I am the supreme authority over my policy of existence. I am supreme power and authority of the universe. We all know that our thoughts shape our reality, right? I am dominion over my inner and outer world. Well, of course you are. Your outer world just reflects back to you your inner world. So if you don't like the way your life looks, just change what's going on inside. And I am the authority to govern myself. So with that said, I have an amazing guest today. Her name is Mai, and she has an organization called MaiHealthNow. Love that. She is a health speaker to Fortune 500 companies, to nonprofits, to health entities, to health companies. And her message is so powerful that I just have to give a disclaimer. Neither one of us are physicians. So we're just saying to you, if you got a health issue, go to your doctor. Okay, I'm not responsible for that. Neither is Mai. So Mai, thank you so much for being here today. This is amazing. I know we're going to really chew the fat on some good stuff.
Thanks for having me. And I love what you said, that our life is in our hands and our health is in our hands, most importantly. We have so much control over how we feel and how we navigate our health in the world.
Yes, it's so true. And I think I was mentioning to you when we were just chatting before I hit the go live button, that I had a lunch meeting on the weekend with some fabulous women, and a couple at the table were both registered nurses, and we were having this conversation about health. And over the last, like, probably since, I guess, maybe the 10th or 15th of August, I've just like shed like 25 pounds just eating healthy. I'm not surely not starving. I mean, I'm not even hungry. And I go through my ups and downs. I have the odd day where my body's screaming for carbohydrates, but once you sort of like get past that moment and you say to yourself, well, what am I really screaming for here? The carbohydrate craving is a bodily response to what emotion, to what thought pattern. And I was explaining this experiment to these ladies and how I'm doing, keto, and I'm doing one meal a day, and I'm dropped all this weight, and they just were blown away. I said, yeah, I know. What it does is it really brings your attention back to the notion that food literally is medicine.
It's true. I love that quote, that let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. That's Hippocrates, and that's the father of modern medicine. And people forget that food is your fuel. It's your fuel.
Yeah. And or it's your poison.
Or it's your poison. But a lot of what people are eating today isn't real food. Real food feeds your vitality.
Yeah, I was doing the write-up for the marketing. I always like to write the show notes for the marketing instead of having my team do it, because I pre-interviewed you. We have a connection, and I do that with all my guests. And I feel like I wouldn't have them on if there wasn't something pivotal that we could together bring to the table for the audience. Whether we get along or not is not the point. It's just something pivotal, right? And so I like to write my own show notes in advance. And when I was setting up the marketing, one of the points I made is that the food we consume, farm to table, let's say it that way, farm to table. I feel we're coming as a humanity, some of us are, back like a 180, or maybe it's a 360. We're coming all the way back to the farm to table concept, which is what I grew up with. It was my job to get the vegetables out of the garden. And then in the autumn, we always would butcher a beef and a deer and whatever, farm to table. And so there's an intelligence in that food that our body can work with in harmony. Just like you and I on this podcast, we can work in harmony to get a message out. And even, let's say we disagreed, it would still be a harmonic coming together to get a message out. And that's missing in food today.
It's the energetic. So in my practice, I have a chronic disease prevention pyramid. And it's what it is food affects your mood. You have to move. And also you have to socially connect. And inside that pyramid is the foundation of sleep, which balances your hormones and your insulin levels, then de-stressing, and then breath work, right? Yes. And so much of disease is the opposite of ease. And we live in a very stressed out, unintentional, not mindful society.
Right.
What you put in your mouth, eat with intention, and ask yourself, is this real food? Did it grow from a tree? Or is it processed in a lab?
Ouch. Right? So this is what I noticed. And I've got, before we say goodbye today, I'll share a little bit about next week's guest, or maybe I think he's the week after. But what I noticed, particularly during the pandemic, when I would go shopping, which in Los Angeles was excruciatingly annoying because you had to pretty much wear a hazmat suit to get into the store. And everybody was running around in fear, like they were let's just say that everybody, were well programmed that they were going to die on the spot. And so I'm going through I'm looking in the beef section. My iron got low, wasn't outside enough, I wasn't exercising enough, we were on lockdown. My body started to show indications and symptomology of things that I was lacking. And so I decided I better start eating beef again. Every time I get an iron shot in the butt, I've got this big old bruise that lasts for months at a time. And so I couldn't find any beef that was US beef. It was from every other country on the planet. Like there was New Zealand beef, there was Uruguay beef, there was Brazilian beef, there was, did I say Australian? I mean, and sometimes they were all in one package. I'm like, where is the American beef? What happened? Did all the American ranchers just shut down? I don't think so. So that raised my first red flag, and then I'm really questioning. Now I'm kind of like afraid to buy beef in a store. I go to a rancher.
During the pandemic, because I do farm to table in my own family, I belong to a CSA. That's a community supported agriculture. You call it CSA. So I knew a lot of the farms around my area, and I went straight to the farms, didn't have any problems getting the meat straight from the farms.
Yeah.
And these are small farms that are environmentally sustainable, right?
Yes.
Because there was a lot of processing issues with the pandemic,
Sure.
but we're here now, and it's about eating real food and having intention. And most importantly, especially for women, oftentimes women put themselves last, and you're not going to be healthy doing that. You have to be unapologetic about your health, because my favorite quote is, you can't pour from an empty cup. Your job is to keep your cup full.
Right. Well, and I can counter that with saying, I coach male CEOs, and generally they're like early 40s to late 60s, and their hormones are dropping, their testosterone's dropping, brain fog is kicking in, memory loss, lack of that, sort of hungry, let's get up and get after it today kind of zest for life. And then alcohol becomes a thing, a crutch. It's too much estrogen in our food, and then a whole narrative about toxic masculinity. I mean, it just tears at you, wears you down. So I think we're really talking here about mindset and protecting your energy, your vibration, that it doesn't get infiltrated by false narratives and false premises that convince you that it's okay to feel lack of energy and to feel bad and to apologize for your power.
I totally agree. And there's toxic femininity, right? And there is truly the feminine power, which is the creative, surrendering to the mystery of the universe, play. And there is a quote that says, you don't chase abundance or love, you align yourself with your core values, and those things come to you.
Yeah.
And that's the thing with empowered femininity. It's intuitive, it's being authentic, it's being vulnerable but strong, versus the toxic one is being overly emotional, over apologizing, putting yourself last. And this has everything to do with food, movement, and disease, because chronic stress leads to chronic disease. The research shows it. In my line of work, I fuse evidence-based research with also holistic self-care, right? And the two can go together. But again, it's self-awareness, intention, and giving yourself permission to focus on your health and well-being and the joy factor.
Yeah. And so I have this practice that I do, and it's interesting how sometimes I forget it. I'm just always an observer of how I'm moving through life, and how some of the easiest tools that I have that I'm quick to teach to a client, I might have the tendency to forget to apply to myself. So the consistency isn't perfect, But what's fascinating to me is when, in the moment when I remember the tool, and then I go, whoa, I haven't used this for days, weeks, months, whatever, but it came to mind at the perfect moment. And one of my favorite tools is making myself sacred. We can make anything sacred just by declaring it sacred. You know, we can, you know, we've got like this crystal. So we can make this crystal sacred. A lot of people collect crystals and infuse the crystals with their power and their emotion, and then they think this standalone object is the key to something, when in actuality it's just a reflection of you, right? So we can make anything sacred. And I said this to a client one day that was really going through a hard time with some former partners that the stakes were, you know, millions of dollars. And I said, well, what if rather than you putting them on a pedestal above you, you made your business entity, and because it's your baby, your idea, sacred, and therefore they're equally as lucky to have you as you are to have them. And he had a hard time. I mean, whether you're a male or a female, I think just self-worth is probably the Achilles heel of the human race. You know?
Yeah, you know, I love the Henry Ford quote, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. And when we foster our health, we're manifesting how we present in the world, quite frankly. And we're all manifestors, but some of us are intentional manifestors. And that's a quote from the multidimensional MD who lives in Georgia, Dr. Arlene Dahamko, who's a good friend of mine. And that is the thing. People forget that we're shapeshifters. I'm in my late 40s. I'm 48 years old. My birthday was last week. And I remember in my early 40s, people were just like, yeah, your 40s, you just turn into, you know, flab, and that's just the way it is. No,
it's not true.
Not true. It's intention. It's intention and how you want to manifest how you present in the world. Now, I don't want to present as a 20-year-old. I'm not 20. I love being in my late 40s.
Sure.
The goal is to be the best version of yourself and to keep your vitality. Period.
And not put a construct of it on it called a number.
No.
You know, why, for what purpose would it matter if you're in your late 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, if other than you're part of some sort of societal structure that says these numbers mean a certain thing? They mean how you look, how you act, how you dress, how you think, what you will accept, what you will give up, even whether you cut your hair. I mean, you know.
Yeah, and people forget. I mean, I've been fortunate. I've never done Botox. I've never done those injections, never fixed my face, because the premise is that true health is very sexy, right?
Yes.
It's not injecting, it's your vibe. And how do you take away chronic disease? How can you prevent it? So the Harvard longevity studies show out of exercise, out of eating, out of sleeping, out of healthy social connections, out of those four, which is the most important for a long disease-free life? Which one do you think it would be?
Give me the options again.
Exercise, sleep, food, and healthy social connections.
Wow. Well, I would say that if we have healthy social connections, the rest we can limp through.
Bingo.
Right? Because then we can infuse our food with love because we're connecting.
And not only that, but healthy social connections. When you hang out with people who make you feel safe, are conscientious, and they're healthy, guess what? That is a positive epidemiology, energy, contagion factor. That's a good contagion.
I can see that.
Right? So if you want to have a disease-free, vibrant life, hang out with the 5 healthiest people you know that are joyful, that are positively manifesting their life, that are intentional, and they're conscientious. Conscientious is follow through with yourself, follow through with your word, follow through with your actions.
Yeah,
So it's believe, do, have.
absolutely. And the first two words of believe are be,
Yes.
who we're
And
being.
I love what you do, Deborah. It's amazing because mindset is everything when it comes to health
And business.
and
You know,
business.
I had a conversation with a guy this morning that used to work at a massive major aeronautics company, which I will not name. And, you know, he's at another company now, and they're looking to bring me on board to do some leadership consulting. And he said, what's the main thing you lead with? And I said, well, it's always going to be mindset of the leadership, because, you know, I'll look at your strategy and see how that is in alignment. But any company can have a brilliant strategy, but if the mindset of the leadership is headed the wrong direction, that strategy will never get traction. So it's everything.
Yeah, not only that, but with disease, you want to go into ease. If there's so much stress and pushing, you're on the wrong path. There's a misnomer that health has to be hard. It doesn't.
It's actually the easiest thing. So this is something that I learned, and I used to own a gym. You know, when I was in my 20s, I owned a gym and I trained professional athletes, and so it's nothing new to me. But what's interesting is going through this process now, post pandemic, after, you know, the entire planet was brought to its knees out of fear of death, to really tune into my body at a whole other level, and going through the change up in the type of foods I eat, and the intermittent fasting part gives a great deal of space in between food to really get in touch with, what are you really craving here? You know, are you craving touch? Are you craving a kind word? Do you need some encouragement? How could I give that to myself if there aren't in my circle people that are able or capable or available to do that? How could I do that for myself? And which is why I wanted to read this definition of sovereign. You know, when we can bring to ourselves enough self-awareness that we can not heal ourselves, but allow our natural state of healing, just leave it alone. You know, we have an innate divine blueprint for perfect health. Homeostasis is the nature of our cellular structure. If we just leave that alone.
Yeah, it's interesting because there is a concept called emotional hunger. And
Yeah.
a lot of people are walking around not connecting, not being authentic, not hanging out with conscientious, up-leveling friends. So with
Yes.
emotional hunger, there's always a sense of shame. If you're really hungry, like truly starving, if you eat, there's no shame.
Right.
If you're eating because you want to fill a void, or you're overly shopping mindlessly, or you're having, reckless sex just to fill a void, there is shame that's attached to it. And that's
Right.
when you hire your therapist or somatic therapist or a coach to help you come back to yourself. And it's
Yeah.
a simple question. How do I feel? How do I feel? Not, do they like me? Should I drink because everyone else is doing it? How does it make me feel?
Yeah. 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 I feel too that to be around groups of people that are doing, let's say, that have health habits, let's call them that don't align with you. You know, a lot of people see that as a hindrance, especially during the holidays when there's a lot of sweets and a lot of alcohol, and a lot of heavy foods, a lot of, you know, eating on the fly, busy. Um, it can really pull on you to be able to not follow the herd, let's say, and to be okay with that. You know, I find sometimes when I'm in an environment and everybody's having cocktails and I'm not having a cocktail, that it makes them more uncomfortable than it does me. And it's like, chill out, just drink your beer. I'm cool. I love beer too. It's just right now I'm not drinking alcohol. But that doesn't mean you can't enjoy yours.
That's so true. So I was in the Washington Post style section because I was part of this movement called the Sober Curious movement. And it's for people who aren't raging alcoholics, but they decided that alcohol it doesn't make them feel well.
Yeah.
And I gave up drinking 4 years ago because I'm very prone to diabetes type 2.
Hmm.
I'm 40% more likely to get diabetes type 2 than the general population. So I had to do radical change. And what I do is because people don't like feeling judged. When
Yeah.
I go to someone's house, I bring a bottle of wine, but I bring grape juice for myself and I pour it in a wine glass. And I joke, hey, this is unfermented wine,
Sure.
right? Or when I go to a bar, I drink alcohol free beer and it
Sure.
tastes just like beer. But I can't risk my health and life for sugar.
No.
It doesn't serve me and it doesn't make me feel good.
It is so not worth it. And I'll tell you, I've been doing this little experiment on sugar the last few months. And since I started doing keto and intermittent fasting, I'm really able to see some very distinct markers as to what sugar truly does in our lives. And so for probably most of my life, I think you know, late teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, I was a dieting yo-yo. And I couldn't quite figure out what it was because during the time that I would diet and I would lose weight, pardon me, it all came from a sense of deprivation. So there was all this negative reinforcement around it, which doesn't stick, you know. When I would fall off the wagon and I'd go back to my old ways, which was the norm of my environment, of my community, of the people that I knew, I fit in better because I would eat and drink like and think like them, but my body couldn't tolerate it. So then I would puff up, I would gain weight, I would be like sometimes really overweight, sometimes just sort of overweight. Like I had multiple sizes of clothing in my closet. And but going through this process this time really enabled me to step back from all of that and just ask myself, you know, how does this feel right now? Because my stomach would be full, but I was still hungry. So that meant there was something emotionally going on that was a void in my life. So then I would step back and I'd look at that. And sometimes the answer doesn't come right away. It might be next week or next month when you're going for a walk or taking a drive or running an errand. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's what that's about. But it all began to add up because I was willing to go through the journey as an experiment, not as a punishment to my body because it didn't look the way I wanted it to look.
I love that. I love the idea of going towards abundance and away from lack. I also practice intermittent fasting, and I got a very bad case of COVID where I got a lung infection and went to anaphylactic shock with the medicine they gave
Oh my
me. It was horrible, and my insulin levels spiked up. So I was like, I
God.
need to practice radical self-care. So for anyone listening, if you are in a bad place, maybe you're pre-diabetic, 88 million Americans are pre-diabetic and they don't know about it. That's 1 out of 3. This is what you need to start asking yourself. How can I lower my stress levels in a radical, unapologetic way? Am I getting my 7 to 8 hours of sleep? Because lack of sleep can cause diabetes type 2. And
Yeah.
number 3, am I being intentional? So I did the Whole30, which really worked for me. It's paleo based. And I recruited my close friends to do it with me. We had
Nice.
once a week Zoom calls. We had a private Facebook group. And guess what? We all lost weight. And weight was inflammation.
Yeah, it was probably just inflammation and water.
It's inflammation. So
Yeah.
if you want to get healthier, recruit your friends to get healthier.
And see, that's what I noticed about getting off of all sources of sugar. Like even, uh, you know, a piece of bread or a pasta dinner. I mean, a baked potato, it converts to sugar. And your body, if you have any sensitivity at all, which we develop over time by yo-yo dieting, poor habits, poor sleep, all the things you just said, you know, bad sleeping, a lot of stress, redlining our adrenals by pushing and not allowing, like making things happen instead of being in alignment. We can be predisposed to the insulin resistance, and then the inflammation just flares up in our bodies, and you know, we suffer that. I mean, and then what drives me crazy is we chalk it up to age. It's like, oh, you know, I'm just, you know, I hear people say it all the time. It's my age. It's no, honey, it's not your age. It's how you treat your body. It's your lack of awareness.
It's your lack of awareness. So a lot of people are tuning out instead of tuning in because they don't want to feel that pain. And we live in a society where we have a pill for everything, but we don't have a panacea for self-awareness,
Right.
right? And so with my clients, because I've worked with hedge fund executives, C-suite people just like you, when they come to me to get healthier, the first thing I do is I teach them how to actively listen, to
Yeah.
mindfully listen to other people, just mindfully be present. The more you can be present, the more you tune in. Any substance that tunes you out, like sugar, like alcohol, like drugs, that's taking you away from your truth.
Yeah. Yeah. And the further you get away from your truth, the more of the substances you need to maintain some sort of sense of functionability. You know, it's just keeps throwing you sideways.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, I'm in my late 40s, almost pushing 50, and it gets better and better if you take care of yourself because you have that wisdom. Then you see the friends who succumb to addiction, alcoholism, drug use, and it is not pretty. And I just, you know, if there's one thing, if you want to keep disease away, practice giving yourself self-compassion and grace. That's the first step to getting healthy.
Okay,
Because
let's stop there because that's key. It sounds good. I get it because I teach it. But what does that mean? What I know I can hear clients saying to me, well, what is that?
self-compassion is if you're going for progress, not perfection. So it's that automatic negative self-talk that paralyzes you. It's an excuse not to be intentional. Like, oh my, you can't do that. Who do you think you are? That's ANT, that's automatic negative self-talk. You're not teaching self-compassion. You're not treating yourself with self-compassion. You talk to yourself like you would your best friend going through a hard time.
Or a baby.
And you practice action.
Yeah.
Action brings clarity.
Always.
Inaction is paralysis and automatic negative self-talk.
Always. Yeah.
And you're the mindset queen. You know this.
Yeah, it's just I like it to be said differently every time it's said because the same people watching may not have connected with it the last time it was said, you know. I think there's always so many different ways we can say the same thing. I have this instruction that I use when I teach a seminar, and I say, listen, you can ask me to repeat something as many times as you need it repeated until you can get it. And then my job as a facilitator is to give you the answer in a different way until the light bulb goes on, because there's so many different perspectives, right?
Yeah, and depending on the chapter in your life, right? What worked for you a decade ago won't work for you now. Your cells regenerate every 7 years. So the way I lived 7 years ago, I can't live now. And you have to meet yourself where you are and go towards progress, not perfection. Perfection stops you in your tracks. Progress helps make you aware to evolve.
I think that with that said, when you're setting a goal, let's say you're setting a new goal for your health. And a lot of people, I hear them say, I just want to get back to when I was blah, blah, blah. And I stop them and I say, okay, so if you want to get back to XYZ, how does that feel in your body? Like, does your body resonate with that? Can your body align with that and make that happen? And usually they get a no. So then I have them reframe it and I say, okay, now ask your body to become what you would like it to become, and see how that feels. Because our body will always say, this feels good, I can do this, or not. The body will give us the indication if the way we're instructing it is actually headed in the direction that it wants to go as well. Because our body wants to be healthy. We're born to regenerate.
Yes, and your body is talking to you. First, it goes with a cold, then a headache, and then it might be a terrible, terrible illness, goes into disease. So you
Yeah.
have to ask yourself, what's my body telling me?
Yeah.
I need to listen. Even when you bump into negative people, right? And maybe they didn't do anything to you, but their energy just isn't your vibe. Do you feel drained? Do you feel invigorated? Do you feel inspired? Or do you feel like you want to go to sleep? Listen to
Oh
that.
man.
That is embodiment.
It is. It is. It's so true. I had, through this whole like last 3-month journey of keto and OMD, I really started to tune into unresolved negative emotions and limiting beliefs that have been hiding away, even after being a coach and having all the tools and working on myself for years. We're always, and I want to say this because people have this erroneous belief that you just work on yourself a little bit or for a little while, you go to a seminar, read a couple books, and then poof, everything's good. It's like, no, this is a lifelong journey. You will always be becoming more of who you can become. And so, in order to become more authentically you, there's going to be stuff that's been tucked away that you thought or maybe didn't even think existed, that's going to show itself. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It just means you're clearing out some other layer of programming that you got back, 0 to 7, when you were so malleable and a little sponge that you didn't question what you were being taught about yourself or about the world. So just let it,
Yeah, I love the idea you have to purge to surge.
right?
Right? And there's a wonderful book that a lot of therapists use now about trauma. It's called The Body Keeps a Score by
That's a
Bessel van der Kolk.
yeah.
And your body, even if your mind has cognitively, you thought you digested it, your body keeps a score. So you want to get it out of your body. How do you do that? You practice self-love. You eat
Yeah.
fuel that makes you feel good, not shame. Get away from shame. Meet yourself where you are. Go towards progress, small steps
Baby.
like drinking water make
Mm-hmm.
a profound difference as long as there's intention and you want to get the right support. Using Deborah as your coach, using me as a guide by your side to get your health in gear.
Well, and the thing is that, so how do you know that this food consumption is attached to, say, shame, the negative emotion of shame? All you have to do is turn on the television and watch an advert, and all of the foods that are being promoted as being something that makes you feel better is going to have some kind of negative emotion attached to it, because that's a societal program. That's something that society agrees upon in mass, that, desserts, fried foods, cocktails, like all of these things are associated with a taboo kind of deal. So your natural inclination when you consume it is going to be, this is bad for me, but it's a treat. So find other ways to treat yourself, and instead of treating yourself with food, get a massage, take the day off, go for a hike in the forest. You could do things that don't cost any money. You don't have to be out spending money if money is going to be an issue. There's a lot of things you can do that are free of charge, that will foster a sense of celebratory because our cells are always thinking, and our cells remember everything for eternity. So what is it you want to stir up in the cells today? Is it self-love, or is it a sense of self-deprecation? And it's a choice every moment.
Yeah, there's a truism, I believe it's Native American. Two wolves show up. I'm paraphrasing this. One is hate, one is love. And this little boy says, "Grandfather, who's going to show up?" And the grandfather says, "The one you feed."
Always.
Right? And I love that. When you lead yourself by self-awareness and curiosity and not narratives from the past or fear of the future, and you're just very present,
Yeah.
and I did a media cleanse where I don't own a TV. So my house is very peaceful. But I did a media cleanse on the news, and it's been so invigorating.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's a lot of studies, the more TV you watch, the more you gain weight, because it's those commercials, those subliminal messaging. So one way to get curious is start journaling. I do 3 pages every single morning without fail. I follow The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron.
Yeah.
It's a way to get into your subconscious mind and clear out. Again, you got to purge to surge.
Yeah, absolutely. And give yourself the space to become more of you instead of some sort of fabricated facsimile of a status quo in order to make the people around you feel comfortable. And I think that's really the key. This has been fantastic. Thank you for being here.
Lovely to be here. It's been a joy, and I'm glad we can really help people get more embodied.
I agree. And, no pun intended, but maybe embodied. What's your URL?
MaiHealthNow.com. That's MaiHealthNow.com.
Fantastic. So we'll make sure we include that in the show notes and send everybody over there. And do you have any last parting thoughts you'd leave?
Yeah, if anyone here wants to send me a message, I'm on Instagram at MaiHealthNow, and I'd love to answer your questions. That's MaiHealthNow. Check me out. I'd love to be part of your journey.
That's fantastic, Mai. Thank you again. And remember, everyone, stay aligned, stay alert, and